So hello everybody, my name is Jessica Hemans. I'm the Manager of Conferences, Events, and Trainings here at the National Consumer Law Center. Today is May 8, 2014. Today's webinar is Creative Thinking About Developing Rural Food Systems. This webinar is part of the National Alliance for Rural Policy. Our speakers today are Janet Kagan. She's the Director of ArtForce. We have Adele Phillips, Center for Rural Affairs. She's a Program Associate there for Rural Opportunities and Stewardship Program. And we have Veronica Erenberg from also the Center for Rural Affairs. She's the Community Food Specialist for Rural Opportunities and Stewardship Program. So this webinar is part of the National Alliance for Rural Policy. National Alliance for Rural Policy is comprised of 11 national organizations working together to engage in policy issues and opportunities that affect rural communities. Each organization's work is unique, but all are deeply connected to rural stakeholders and dedicated to enriching the lives of rural citizens. Our first speaker today is Janet Kagan. Janet has more than 35 years of experience in strategic program planning and project management in art and economic development. She leads and directs interdisciplinary planning and designs teams in collaboration with communities, artists, and government to achieve creative, aesthetic, and economic revitalization goals. So welcome, Janet. We also have today Adele Phillips. She will be speaking after Janet. After taking full advantage of the gritty, adventurous, and labor-intensive opportunities offered by childhood on her family's dairy farm, Adele earned a master's degree in architecture from MIT. Today, she is excited, honored, and privileged to be back home in Nebraska working with communities on a diversity of projects which present endless opportunities for civic engagement and creativity. So welcome, Adele. And after Adele, we also have Veronica Erenberg. Fresh off of work on a 20-acre organic vegetable and small greens farm on Long Island, Veronica brings her experience working with the Hoopa Valley Reservation in California and their low-income CSA. Her work with Center for Rural Affairs is focused primarily with the Santee Sioux and Omaha tribes. So welcome, Veronica. And now before I pass it over to Janet, we're going to do a poll to engage our audience. We want to see who you all are, so I just launched it. It should pop up on your screen. If you all can fill that out for us, that'd be great. You just click on the button. All right, I see people are participating. I'll give you about 15 more seconds. Okay, let me share the results. Okay, so as you can see, we have 11% identify with a farmer or producer or a CSA, 9% are policy makers, 20% are interested consumers, 55% are advocates, and 26% are with a CDC. So that would be a Community Development Corporation. So welcome everybody to the webinar. All right, we're done with the poll. I'm now going to pass this over to Janet. So hello. Okay, we can see your screen now. Sorry about the delay. Go ahead.
Very good. Thank you all for your patience and understanding and for your interest in this topic. The scope of the problem we're trying to address, thinking creatively about rural food systems, is multifaceted, and it requires that we address both supply and demand issues, as well as creatively respond to food access, affordability. 58% of Americans are classified as low income by the federal government, and nutrition, which begs the question, what is being produced and for whom is it being produced? If you are or are working with populations confronting such problems, it's important to determine not only the scope of the neglect, but how it impacts the community. ArtForce has been focused on 3 broad areas that frame our thinking. The first is cultural, where in some populations it is preferable to purchase and cook an entire animal or fish as opposed to acquire prepared and filleted meats. The other is social. And if you are working in an economically distressed urban community, you are well aware of the long-standing socioeconomic disparities that exist. If you are living or working in a more rural context, those same issues are driving many decisions. And finally, health, which as a country, I believe that we are no longer ignoring the significant negative consequences of food opportunities on medical conditions and cost. Yet rural communities, unlike some of their marginalized urban counterparts, are challenged in very unique ways. They are distinctly disadvantaged because grocery stores invest in areas that align with foot traffic without population density. Through transportation by bus, car, or foot, they are increasingly unwilling to make any capital investment. This condition leads to food insecurity, where 1 in 5 people would be such classified. The most recent rankings that came out put Mississippi at the top with almost 22% and include New Mexico, Georgia, Arkansas, Alabama, North Carolina, Arizona, Texas, Florida, and South Carolina as the most food insecure states in the United States. To further complicate entrepreneurial initiatives, some zoning prohibits the sale of fresh food. In one county where ArtForce is working, it is illegal to have a farm stand on farm property. Future and younger farmers are certainly sensitive to and skilled in more contemporary food preferences. But the difficulty is that they are migrating from these rural communities because there is neither social nor nightlife to attract them and to keep them in such communities where they could make a difference. But let's turn to what's positive. Small-scale farming is increasing. Four-corner gardens are popping up. Niche value-added food production operations are being developed and are looking for expansion in some areas. And that is becoming a successful model. Data recently released by the University of Minnesota states that we actually have plenty of food. But what we need to do is change what we eat and reconsider the nutrition, such as shifting to less meat-intensive diets, which has a dramatic impact on the food that is actually being produced to keep cattle. There are tens of millions of dollars that are being allocated today to reinventing place and assisting rural communities in attracting a younger demographic. There is a strong history that is driving those particular projects based in folklore and a core of authenticity. These are projects that involve everything from ancestral foods that are being grown in innovative ways, such as vertical hydroponics, glass corn in Arizona, and there are now, those are other ways that producers are creating demand. In a marginalized community where I would share there is an urban demonstration that could be applied in a rural context. There's an organization as a nonprofit grocery store called Philabundance outside of Philadelphia. In the margins of that neighborhood where they are making food available as well as producing jobs, where there currently is no transportation. Cookeries and storage organizations are also addressing local demand and distribution. One such rural facility is serving 36 businesses, and in March of this year, one of their product producers is now in 1,000 stores, including metropolitan grocery stores where they are being distributed, and another product is in 7 international countries. There are several agencies at the state and federal levels that are dedicated to such marketing and sales for these emerging businesses. They are usually hosted through the USDA at the federal and state level and departments of commerce at the federal and state level. Mobile groceries are also emerging and serving as alternative vehicles to source local foods into marginalized areas. And we also must remember that there's stiff competition for public investment. as regions compete against each other for business and private enterprise. They're looking not just for inexpensive real estate where to locate a corporate headquarters, they're also looking for a quality of life for their staff and employees, which provides an opportunity for rural communities to think about food as their network to offer. I want to share with you that in September, on Wednesday the 3rd through Friday the 5th in Greensboro, North Carolina, ArtForce is going to be co-hosting a convening of rural practitioners and leaders, artisans and artists, entrepreneurs and philanthropists, policymakers and nonprofits. And we will be sharing examples of rural success, such as value-added products and services. We'll be looking at 6 broad themes, including artisan and agricultural entrepreneurs. How do we build such skills, either through apprenticeship programs, culinary arts residencies, industrial design? Looking at creative infrastructure on repurposing abandoned buildings, developing community alliances, food hubs. Rural ingenuity and creativity. How does one create and identify those assets for viable economic opportunity? How does one get to scale through unique distribution models and niche value-added agriculture? How does the story of your community, how does that narrative get created? And what is the best way to attract investors and philanthropists to move that work forward? And finally, we'll be looking at local, state, and federal resources that exist and future policy initiatives that as all of us are in this together, we may wish to address. So that is an overview of the big picture, and I'd now like to turn this over to Adele and Veronica to share a specific story of their success.
Thank you, Janet. It's Jessica. I just want to let you know we weren't able to have people share the Q&A. Looks like we're not able to do it, but we did. People are able to see the attendee list, and you can, I think, maybe chat among each other. Just want to let you know. Thanks.
Hello, this is Adele from Center for Rural Affairs. And if you do find that you have some questions that you'd like to ask, all the contact emails from today's presenters will be shown on a slide at the presentation. But again, hello and thank you everyone for joining us. We view this as a learning opportunity for us too, and do look forward to your feedback. Veronica and myself, we work for an organization called Center for Rural Affairs. It's a 40-year-old organization that is based in Nebraska. We're most active in the Northern Plains, but we serve rural America. We have less than 50 employees, and about 3/4 of our staff are actually stationed remotely throughout the region. And we have a newsletter that reaches a constituency of about 20,000 folks all across the U.S. We do three areas of work, one of which is policy. We work at the federal and also state level. And key topics recently have been the Affordable Care Act, working with states to advocate for a Medicare expansion package. But also we do policy on green energy or clean energy, working with communities to understand how expansion of transmission lines will get sustainable energy farmed and also consumed. We also do small business lending. Our small business lending program ranks 9th nationally. Last month it lent its $10 millionth dollar. And within our small business lending program, we have both a women's business center and a Hispanic business center. And we provide a variety of services, not just the lending, but also planning and feasibility to help people plan out that dream of owning a small business and doing it in a smart way, and then getting them the resources they need. And then Veronica and myself work for the third program branch, which is our direct services branch. And we are facilitators in communities. We work on a variety of issues, primarily food access and organic agriculture, as well as expansion of wildlife habitat, and also helping build racially and culturally inclusive communities. So we're all about community vibrancy. So we've got a little bit of delay with the slide, it looks like, but we'll move on and talk specifically about our work with the Omaha and Santee Sioux Native American tribes, which are neighbors to our organization. We appreciate your patience with our technical difficulty. Looks like it.
So is it just not advancing for you all? You're clicking it? Can you try your arrow keys? Or your mouse? One or the other?
Oh, there we go.
Great, we can see it.
All right. So the location we're working in, if you look at the map in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, Center for Rural Affairs is in northeast Nebraska, about where that blue star is, and the two tribes we work with are in the two pink counties, Knox County, where the Santee Sioux are, and Thurston County, where the Omaha are. And, many of you probably have seen the USDA food desert mapping that came out last fall. Several of the counties in northeast Nebraska have been designated as food deserts, but the areas with the least access are these reservations. Community members have to drive at least 80 minutes to get to what an average American would envision as a grocery store. There are some snack shops in these towns, but it's chips and soda. And so physical access to fruits and vegetables and locally grown food is quite limited. But there's also an added layer of access to information, knowledge about food preparation, familiarity with cooking and growing, harvesting, storing food. And there's been a kind of a weakening or a all-out breaking in the chain of traditional food knowledge being passed from generation to generation. And all across the United States, we've seen a general loss in food knowledge, as exhibited by our food waste, our health issues, etc. But it's very keenly felt in these two communities. Entrepreneurship is also an area where work or improvement is needed. Unemployment in the Omaha tribe is at 38.9%. In the Santee tribe, it's at 28.9%. And this compares to a statewide unemployment rate of 5.6%. In Macy, Nebraska, which is the community in the Omaha tribe where we work, 60% of the families fall below the poverty line. In Santee, it's nearly 50% of the families that fall below the poverty line. Now, as you probably realized in the introductory slide, that Veronica and I are not native. So we are inherently outsiders to these communities, but we're doing our best to advocate for and represent their needs. But as outsiders, we're working really hard to make sure that we're always learning as we go and being very culturally sensitive and tailoring the work to suit cultural needs and knowledge. And with that, I'll pass it on to Veronica to tell you more about the real practical side of things and how we do this work.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit of the history. We've been working with the Santee for 2 years, since 2011, in launching this garden and farmers market project. The partnership is with the local Nebraska Indian Community College. And we've just recently launched this project in Macy with the Omaha Reservation. I guess the overall catchphrase or purpose is to create that entrepreneurship, provide healthy food options, strengthen community, and lifting up cultural knowledge. This is an Erenberg grant, a Rural Business Enterprise grant. So the focus is on creating small business development through technical assistance, through training, and support to develop small businesses. And I guess we've kind of added a twist onto it with also providing this opportunity to have access to healthy foods in the community. And we're doing this through family gardens. We are helping to launch new gardens, and we're also working with existing gardeners, experts that have been in the community growing for years, and bringing those folks together mainly through bi-monthly workshops that are held at the Nebraska Indian Community College, where we bring in local and regional experts on various beginning gardener topics, in everything from sowing seeds, transplanting, harvesting, and storing for the winter. This provides an opportunity for existing gardeners to exchange information, and for new gardeners to exchange information, and it also provides kind of an informal way for also elders to discuss their past growing experiences. Another part of this is launching a farmers market. There was we helped launch a farmers market in 2012 in Santee, and that went really well. We had about 16 vendors, about 8 vendors at each market at any given time, and then we had about 400 customers come through the market. Most of these were reaching out to other communities. Most of the customers were from out of town. And now we're relaunching it in Santee, and then launching a new one in Macy on the Omaha Reservation. This will be a weekly opportunity for market gardeners, bakers, handmade arts and crafts to be sold. Folks can make a small income, and then it's open not only to the local community but also to other area communities. It provides another opportunity for those existing food sellers, beaters, to sell their products on a more consistent basis. And then through that, we also provide business workshops. So we will hold a series of 3 workshops on how to sell at a farmer's market, pricing, and such. With each workshop that we hold, we do a short food demonstration. We are realizing that a lot of folks aren't necessarily familiar with the foods that they're growing and how to prepare them. Or they kind of just stick to the 4 to 5 vegetables that they're familiar with. So trying to expand that educational piece. So we do a short food demonstration that involves products that can be grown in your backyard, and then we show how to prepare that. And then we also serve that meal. So there's a time after the workshop where we sit down, and that's actually where like the real discussions happen around gardening and such. In each location, we've hired a garden manager. This provides a one-on-one opportunity for gardeners and this garden manager to provide advice for the family garden, any questions that they may need, assisting with workshops, assisting with all that. And then we also have hired a farmer's market manager. This is to help recruit, set up, and run the market, figuring out what, assisting vendor needs, and just kind of that end of things. And then with each workshop, we've hired a caterer, a local caterer who makes our meals, and a lot of participants, they respond better to when the meals are, homemade, and so. And then we also have, within this grant, we have put money towards hiring cultural trainers. So folks in the community who are interested in presenting and being present at the workshops. And in Macy, with the Omaha Reservation, there's already a precedent for hiring elders to present and to be paid for their services. In Santee, it's a little tougher. There's a smaller population. So that's kind of where we're at. So we're able to kind of create a framework for folks to grow food, to start growing food, to start bringing back that cultural knowledge, to start selling their products on maybe a more consistent basis. And so that's kind of where we're at with what we're doing. And on to Adele with partnerships.
Yeah, all of our project success is dependent upon being able to build partnerships within the communities. And one of the most important points, I guess, that we need to make as a nonprofit is that it's not us, it's you. It's as a nonprofit, and you're kind of accustomed to having to tout your successes to potential funders or in grants, but really success of a project it's not the organization, it's the communities that the organization engages that make a project successful. And we use a variety of tools to be engaged with our communities, or a variety of structures, I guess, such as compiling advisory committees from local members. These folks may come from the tribal council or other tribal leadership, or come from various health and educational facilities in the community. They can be elders. They can just be concerned citizens that want to see more of this activity in their community and have a feel for what the community's interest is. And then within that, we always make sure that we're in conversation with the community leadership, the governance. We regularly report to the tribal council updates, and we always make sure that we're aware of, sensitive to, and engaging the decision-making hierarchies that are in place, the governance structures there. Before we go about doing tilling up what is tribal-owned land, essentially, the homes that community members live in are not their homes; they're the tribe's homes, and so we have to make sure that we have permission to be carrying out these activities. And so it's very much about respecting those processes. And also, at the end of the day, getting work done and getting these projects realized is about having those one-to-one relationships with people, building trust, having conversation, getting to know people on a very personal level. It's not just business, it's about people's lives, and we're we're trying to build relationships between our organization, our staff people, and the community members, but also facilitate relationship building between community members themselves as well. And then Veronica is going to speak more to the, oh, you'd like me to do it? Okay. I'll talk more about other special considerations. Like I mentioned earlier about the tribal council process and making sure that we're respecting those processes. With regard to the content of our food demonstrations, we have to incorporate that local knowledge or the traditional knowledge, do things in the way that's appropriate, such as in our garden kickoff. At the end of the ceremony, we presented a blanket to the eldest male in the room, who also has been an advisor to this project, because that is the tradition in these community gatherings and kickoffs, is that you present a blanket to the elder of significance in that room. And luckily, because we've set up an advisory committee, we've got folks who can let us know ahead of time that you need to make sure you do that at this kickoff. And so we can, thanks to having an engaged advisory committee, we can avoid pitfalls and just have things brought to light to us that we as outsiders of different cultural heritage wouldn't guess naturally. There's also, we have to be aware of this long-standing marginalization that these tribes are facing still and have faced in the past. As outsiders, again, we will never fully comprehend, but we just try to be aware of it and learn as much as we can, and understand that it's something to take into consideration when we're planning our activities. Building trust, again, trust in rural communities is huge, and not just between native and non-native community members, but trust in rural communities takes some building up. It takes time for folks to become part of a community in general. I have a neighbor lady who she owns her house outright, and she's been a member of the she moved to town 20 years ago, but she'll jokingly say, it's not my house. It won't be my house until I've passed away. And that's that's just how time and these communities are. So we understand that we need to be patient and build relationships, have these conversations, and prove ourselves over time and win that trust. And one way to win trust is through commonalities. Finding the common ground between you and the community members is a really easy thing to do, and it's good to just make time for those conversations where you can celebrate those commonalities.
Okay. Looking ahead, I'm new to this project. I just started in November, but there's a lot to be done, lots of potential to be doing things, and these are just kind of some of the topics that we would like to look into and like to engage the community with. A lot of folks are already engaged in doing these things, and it's bringing those community partners together to start those conversations. to start talking about food sovereignty. Our project right now is just based, it's just focusing on adults, while lots of folks equate gardening and knowledge with engaging youth, so kind of engaging youth and elders, so kind of creating that stronger tie, creating conversations between different reservations across the U.S., wanting to do that. Currently, the health services, the folks that we're working with in Santee and Macy, we're currently trying to figure out how our partnerships can work out. It's, they're so heavily related, but we're not there yet. And then a lot of folks aren't necessarily aware of the grant opportunities and trainings that are available. So making that available, even small garden grants of $500 to get some seeds, it's it's just starting to begin. And then
with the last one is infrastructure, and that references things such as greenhouses or equipment such as rototillers or drip hose, for irrigation. We try to take as lightweight an approach as possible and not have these expenditures on infrastructure unless it's absolutely known that we can utilize it and known that we can cover future management costs. So any piece of equipment or infrastructure has a future financial burden, right? And where our work is made possible through grant money, which may or may not be available 2 years down the road. So we try to be as smart as possible about those types of items and utilize resources that are already present in the community. And with that, we'll open up the discussion, bring it back to Janet, and our contact information, telephone numbers, emails, and web URLs are all here on this final slide.
Great. Excuse me. Great. Thank you. We do have some questions. We had a question. Let's see. Kimberly wanted to know earlier, I think when Janet was talking, when is the Rural Assembly Conference? Do we have dates for that?
We do. It is, and I could put that slide back up, or happy to when you access this webinar. There will be a link to a website and pre-registration. The exact dates are starting on Wednesday, the 3rd of September, which is that first week after Labor Day, and running through Friday afternoon, September 5. It will be in Greensboro, North Carolina, and there is an early bird registration. There is a call for session topics and presenters, which people could submit proposals that they might be interested in providing to the Program Planning Committee, and as well all the logistics for how to get to Greensboro, North Carolina, and where the conference will be held.
Great. Okay. Let's see. Vicki wanted to know, I think this is for Veronica and Adele, where do you find funding for all of the personnel needed for your community projects? Is it all from RBEG?
Hi, this is Adele. A lot of our direct service work, so the organization as a whole has private donations coming in. We also get foundation money, which funds most of our policy work. Small Business Association is all the small business lending. But for direct service work, we're heavily dependent upon USDA grants. RBAG, Rural Entrepreneurship Grant, that is a USDA grant.
Great. All right. When teaching people about how to grow healthy food, do you also explain to them what's best for them to grow and the benefits that these specific foods will provide nutritionally?
We do touch on that. That's kind of one of the issues that we're actually facing is there isn't really any nutritional programming in these locations to begin with. I know there's some one-on-one direct nutritionist counseling, but we ourselves are not able to make that link at this moment, along with a lot of our other health partners. So yeah, it's an ongoing trying to figure that out. And if anyone on this call has recommendations or ideas that they'd like to share, we'd love to hear.
Great. Okay. So for Adele and Veronica, what have been some of the biggest challenges and what have you learned from them?
I wish we could ask that person to be a little bit more specific.
Are there any recent challenges you could talk about that you all have worked on?
Well, I guess initially, challenges change as project develops. Initially, being white folks, we're greeted with a lot of skepticism, and so I think that was the initial hurdle was being able to share with people about the work and relay that it's not another example of an exploitative relationship, to be frank, because that's what white people represent there, and then people really love the idea of community gardens, and so in terms of the concept, that goes over really well. Organic agriculture, organic gardening too, goes over really well. I think the next hurdle after you've, I guess, won some trust is convincing local people that yes, it is possible to do this. They like the idea and want to see it happen, but there's pessimism about the feasibility. And that pessimism is based on that long-standing marginalization, and it's just one finds himself in a cycle of belief that things can't change, and so I guess one of the biggest challenges is getting people to really believe that things can change and that the power to change those things is within them and within their community.
Great. Thank you for that. Janet, Timothy asked, do you incorporate creative placemaking into your projects?
We do. Thank you for such a open-ended question, other than just a yes-no answer. Absolutely. ArtForce has, as its sustaining mission, is economic revitalization of community and to develop a base of intellectual and social assets, and those are fundamentally grounded in place. So our projects that we take on are about how can we, in this context, work with a community, and I will use one example that's very recent, which centered around food, actually production, and working it through the chain of preparation, cooking, distribution. Where a food hub is an obvious place for that to happen, but these are jobs that get created for community residents. They're either in after school, high school after school, and they are about building and learning. So for us, that's about what becomes indigenous, what becomes authentic, what is the history of place, and from that determining, probably the best word to use at this point would be to say sort of shifting it up to a contemporary reinterpretation. But it's indigenous qualities, its folklore tradition, what made this place hum in its previous life before it felt as though there was nothing. And our challenge in that case is to come in, identify the appropriate individuals and organizations who are interested in serving as leaders and sustainers, and find the appropriate way to quite frankly, get it up and running so that they then have acquired new skills. And that's the circle. And so that people will ultimately choose to stay in these communities where they either grew up or they are coming into these places. There's a wonderful story. It's not a project that we have worked on, but it's about this value-added development. In northern Vermont, there are two guys, and they wanted to, they had a dairy, and it turned out that it was just too expensive for them in this very rural community to compete against the big dairies. So they decided to go into artisanal cheese, and from that, they set up a series of cheese caves, and they loved French cheese, and they stopped production for a while. They developed a wet lab to process French cow DNA, and in the interim, they have an agreement with Cabot cheese, which is purchased ubiquitously all across America, and they are now growing for Cabot a cheese in their cheese caves, and they're going to start up their own. And the real challenge there is it's not that it's a negative challenge, it's a wonderful challenge, but they're employing a lot of people, and they need to grow, and they don't want to change the quality of life that brought them to that town originally. So those are the kinds of projects that ArtForce does, and that is now about the identification of place. Because now this farm and this community will be known as home too, and people will live where they work. And I use that example. It's very new, it's contemporary for them. We're hoping actually to get them to come and talk at this conference in September and share their story. They've been at it a few years and been very successful. And I hope that answers your question about deriving what is original and making it a community, again, as it once was, but around a new product development line.
Great answer. So let's see here. We do have more questions. Thanks so much to our audience. I hope we can get to most of them. Okay, let's see. This one was really interesting. Karen asked this one. In low population density areas, our growers choose to drive several hours to larger urban markets rather than serve the local folks. Any suggestions for how to counter that?
Well, I'll jump in. I think that it's a two-way street, and it's a little bit about demand at this point. They know that they can sell. One distributor that I'm aware of actually does advance online. So you can actually put in your order in advance before they take fresh fruits and vegetables, chickens, fish, etc., flowers, to larger markets. And if there is a demand that's built into this process, then they will drop it off in those locations in advance. The other that I find kind of interesting is there are producers that are now beginning to communicate with other manufacturers of food as well as restaurateurs. And what they're now doing is beginning to grow what they are around seasonal menus and around what the demand half of the equation of supply is. So rather than drive an hour and a half or more to get to a grocery store for potentially marginalized fresh food, there are these decentralized food hubs where food can get dropped off. Maybe or maybe not there's an FDA-approved industrial kitchen in the back, but in some cases there are. And to begin to invest in that kind of infrastructure is important. It's not necessarily just about having more farmers markets that are not operational 7 days a week and for 8 to 10 hours a day, which make it very much like a live grocery store. But instead, the opportunities where people can come together and they can be cooking fresh food in that context. Because sometimes people also just don't have the equipment to cook fresh food. And we have to be mindful of that as well. I'm not sure that entirely answered Karen's question, but I think it's a step forward toward it.
No, that was great. I want to hear from Adele and Veronica too. But no, that was a great answer, Janet. Thank you.
Hi. One of the things that we found is a hurdle is the marketing aspect. You know, there's actually a nice variety of local growers in northeast Nebraska, but marketing is letting people know that these products exist, and helping those farmers out with marketing is a need that's been identified. You know, a farmer's already got to wear so many hats, and you want them to also be their own salesperson as well. I mean, it's just a lot for a farmer to do, and for a lot of farmers, you know, setting up a web page or something like that by which to sort of passively aggregate orders is also another layer of management and something that they just can't take on. But locally, we've had a sort of online farmers market be established by a woman she's got her own local business, which she needs to market anyway, and she's decided, well, why not expand this and create a year-round sort of online cooperative. And so she's essentially created a sort of collective approach to direct marketing that's working really well. You know, it takes a lot of the burden off of the farmer, but puts things into more of a one-stop shopping sort of situation for the consumer that they're, you know, accustomed to as well. So that's one way of going about it.
Are there, so kind of piggybacking on that question though, specific to like grocery stores, Valerie asked, what are the biggest obstacles in getting local food into the grocery stores or restaurants? Not just on the marketing side, but actually getting in the door. Are there anything that you all are seeing?
I consistently just trying to compete for shelf space and being able to deliver a certain volume for sale in the grocery stores. But I think that depending on, we found that we've got about 3 suppliers to grocery stores in this area, and 2 are quite rigid, but one of them is a more independent grocers network, and they are more, I guess, open to considering those local products. And really it just takes the farmer knowing where the decisions are made in terms of the products being sold, and then talking with the management and the purchasing managers. But yeah.
I would add to that that if there is volume that a producer has, that I would certainly suggest contacting state USDA and state commerce. They have across the United States. Each department does have that marketing capacity. As I mentioned earlier, some focus on international trade, some focus on statewide trade. There is also an index that exists so that people can look up their state's ranking for supporting, and it's called the Locavore Index. And you can look at how many, based on population in the state, how many farmers market CSAs, how many of those growers produce for public schools, how many food hubs they have, and their ranking based on support. And that might be an interesting place to start, because it basically says you are big chain grocery stores, and we want you to take account of this. I also encourage you to go look at the nonprofit model that I mentioned called Philabundance, and they set up their own grocery store, and it is where people can shop. It is at probably about half the price of what you would find at a large retail grocery store. And it's because they're a nonprofit that everybody is willing to produce for them exclusively. So it's an interesting alternative model that says you don't have to, if you want to stay in the for-profit commercial competitive zone, then that index is a really helpful place because it shakes people up. The other would be to establish an independent grocery store or source other than a market.
Great. Okay, so we're just about out of time, but there is one good question about financing that I do want to ask it real quick, and then we need to close. Tim asked, Veronica, you mentioned grant funds and working with the local government. Does the local government financially support your local projects? If so, how?
I know last year they supported hiring a local farmers market manager in Santee. And that's kind of been the only type of support. Otherwise, it's just been our presentation, presenting the project, keeping them updated on the project, and getting their support that way.
I would like to add in, we in 2009 or 2010, we worked with a local Hispanic community in South Sioux City, Nebraska, Sioux City, Iowa, to start a community garden. And we eventually grew that into a farmer's market as well. And 3 years down the line, then the city, because from the beginning we were in conversation with the city parks department and had worked out a deal, I guess, with the city in that the local gardeners, the city would till the garden space and help us find space, because the gardener community kept growing beyond what we could house within the garden. In the city, they had all these little beautification sort of pockets around the community that they had, they needed help maintaining. And so it was sort of a space volunteer labor exchange that we started out with the city initially. And also the city showing support by anybody in the community garden is covered under the city's insurance policy, essentially, which eliminates a major financial burden for us in the grant development and the budget of the grant. So that's a huge in-kind contribution as well. But back to Sioux City, they after those few years of exchange, they decided to take on the management of the project permanently. So they have on staff now hired somebody who's a full-time community garden and farmers market manager. And they've also expanded their project to create a fruit tree, sort of food forest project within the city. You know, we had to do the footwork in the beginning, but from the beginning having the conversation with the local government and you know, being sensitive to their needs and interests and concerns and building those into our work, then they were very willing to do what they needed to in order to see this project further on into the future.
Great, thank you. We need to wrap it up, so I'm not going to ask any more questions. I apologize for those questions we didn't get to. Before I wrap it up, Veronica, Adele, and Janet, any last words or takeaways?
Thank you all, and I look forward to reading the questions when I get a chance to do that. I'm not able to do that right now, and seeing if we can start a discussion. I noticed that the Rural Exchange has agreed to follow up with us, and I'd love to participate in that in any way.
Okay. Likewise, we're really happy at the Center for Rural Affairs that you were willing to share your afternoons with us and hear about our work, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you. Well, this was a really great webinar. I know I'm looking forward to working in my Boston Community Garden this weekend. Just so you all know, Rural Exchange will post information about this webinar, and there'll be a post-webinar discussion at the website that you see here. Please also follow the Facebook page to be part of the discussion. So please do the evaluation for us when you sign out. Just click on the link and it will pop up on your screen. I'll email you tomorrow with the link to our website where you can access the PowerPoint and the recording. And thanks so much to our speakers today. Really great topic, Janet, Veronica, and Adele. And thanks to our audience.